Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hi, guys.
Hi. Hello.
That was aggressive. That was really aggressive.
Sorry, I'm so chipper because
Are
we're
you still
talking.
punchy this week?
I'm always punchy, let's be honest. Everyone's like, what's new? No, I'm just excited because we're talking about season extension, and this is one of
Yay, more
my
work.
favorite Stop it.
Season extension, second best kind of extension after cooperative extension.
Ooh, I
Well
like
put.
that.
After
Yeah.
Boyle County extension.
Let's
All
be
right.
specific, bro.
Okay.
Let's rein it in.
But yes, we're talking about how if you're not done with your garden season, whether that be veggies or flowers or whatever it is, you ain't done yet.
Before we
got
jump
some
into
stuff for
that,
you.
I got a
What?
question for you all. So, I'm a bit of a devil's advocate sometimes, or
No.
skeptic. Let's say
A skeptic.
So, fall as a season, it gets its flowers all the time. People love fall. They're like, ooh, sweater weather, ooh,
Fall colors.
Man,
Fall
sweater weather.
colors.
fall
Sweater
colors,
weather.
whatever.
The guy wearing an orange shirt might have had.
I don't look great in fall colors. I'm just gonna say.
Question.
But anyway.
What? Yeah, I can see that. No,
I'm a
offense.
true
No
autumn
offense.
You opened that door. I'm just going to say.
Yeah, I'll walk right through it. So what are some things that suck about fall?
You know what I hate? I hate that it is cold in the beginning of the day, and then by freaking 11 o'clock, you're sweating your butt off in that cute sweater that you put on because you were freezing cold in the morning. That's what I hate. There, I said it. Mm-hmm.
That's one. That is I think a big downside of fall. The variability throughout the day.
I hate that the time changes. I hate just leave it the way it is. It's fine. Who cares if it's dark in the morning?
Shorter days.
At least it's like a fall back. Like we get an extra of the two time zone
That's not
changes.
fall's fault. That is human civilization.
Yeah,
well,
that's
but it
people
happens
jacking
in
us
the
up.
It's
fall.
associated with the season.
So I
though.
associate.
Okay.
You go to work and it's dark and you get done from work and it's dark. That's the worst drawback to that time period.
Yeah.
I think in Kentucky, it's and in this region, it's also just like so variable how long fall can actually feel like that it's like it's not even a real there is no
Is
definitive
it 2 weeks
start.
or 2 months?
Exactly.
I'm a leaf looker, and there's no predicting fall leaf color as far as timing goes. Some years we have more color than others. Yes, that's fine. But predicting when that may even be anymore is
Leaf
I've
looker.
given up. I have given up. I'm just going to the Northeast this year where the predictability is a bit less variable.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say there is nothing wrong with fall, and that fall is totally exists and is real in the state of Kentucky, having come from Florida where there's 2 seasons, summer and Christmas Day.
You make a good
Here
point.
you have leaves
good
that
point.
change. It gets cool. It's glorious.
Josh,
It's
you
the
have a
best
little
time of the
pumpkin
year.
spice latte on your shirt there.
Can we not make a list of all the things we love about fall, but then we would just gush endlessly?
Yeah, I feel like fall's easy to love, right?
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
And that's why I love it.
Yeah.
Instagram, it's
Just
just,
make this easy for
it's
me.
everywhere.
Thank
Go
you.
with the
Yeah.
flow.
I just, let my feelings happen. I try not to fight them.
No, stop that. Gross. Fight your feelings. Nobody
keep your
likes them.
feelings under
Fight
wraps.
them.
I feel like over time I've just gained an appreciation for spring, and I think even more so my appreciation for summer has increased just because I used to hate it.
Right.
And I'm just sort of dislike it.
Yeah. Love where you're at.
Yeah.
I think I
love the
appreciate
one you're
fall.
with.
I think I appreciate fall for
That's it.
different reasons. I think I appreciate fall not because of the weather or anything, but because it's a signal that I'm about to slow down. That it's it's okay to slow down. There's less light in the day, which does suck, especially when us, it's you're going to work and it's dark and you come home and it's dark and there's nothing to do. But there's also there's nothing to do. You know what I mean? There's the other night the past 2 nights, it's been getting dark, dark by 8:30, and I have been in bed before 10 p.m. for 2 days straight, and it has game changer. I mean, just an extra hour, game changer for me. And
It's annoying in the summer when it's 9:30 out and it's still daylight and you can't go to bed.
Yeah.
Alexis. Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah.
do. I go to bed when it's
I do love the fall's a wind down period for me. It always
yeah,
has
wind down.
been. I love that wind down. I love the weather change. I mean, I love seasonality. I've said that before on the
Yeah.
podcast. I love the 4 seasons. I like all the transition. Just when you get bored of something, Kentucky's going to throw something different at you one way or another.
Could be a
But
flood,
yeah,
could be a tornado. Who knows?
it could be whatever it may bring that
Could be
day.
just
Yeah.
some beautiful sugar maples changing in the
Oh,
fall.
nothing better. I love to hitting the roads and just, leaf looking. Yes, I will own that. I leaf look, and I may even get a PSL, a pumpkin spice
Hmm.
latte while I'm leaf looking. It may put me in the
PSL.
more basic category of the pH scale, but I don't care.
Fun fact, when
I don't care.
Ray gets pumpkin spice
That's
lattes, he
alkaline as
sends me
hell out
pictures
here.
of them in the morning.
I do. I'm
Nice.
You
like,
do what now? Say that again.
When Ray gets like his pumpkin spice lattes, he sends me a picture
yeah,
of them in the morning,
That
and it
is.
usually
yeah,
has like some sort of like hashtag basic on it or
Is it
something like that.
just
it
to
does.
Alexis?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That
Yeah.
is the
And then
cutest
you
thing I
send
have
me your
ever
custom
heard.
flat white drink. Yeah, you
I
send me some
sent
custom mix that I try and undercover love, but I'll never tell you that
yeah.
I love your mixes. Okay.
I send him I like my Christmas one is the oh crap, it's the toffee. It's a toffee one.
Hmm.
And I send him that picture when I get one for Christmas time. So
This
that's
is
our
very
Seasonality.
cute. This is very
that's our cute
heartwarming for
little
me.
conversations.
I
Yeah.
feel like they're so basic. Mhm.
I'm about to break it. It's about to be boot season. I do love me some boots.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's something I'm over the kind of warm weather clothes. I like hoodie weather, It's like
Hoodie
it's like
weather
I'm
is
in a
sweater
absolute
weather.
blanket.
best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweater weather.
Yeah. I love the fact
Well,
that hoodies are there.
some people want to see that summer growing season spirit just go on forever into fall.
That productive
They
season.
in the order,
Masochist.
yeah. Some people call them
Sadist.
masochists. Some people call them season extenders.
These are
And in
different.
in Kentucky and in the region and across the country too, but I would say Kentucky, as far as per capita, is
Hmm.
the NRCS EQIP high tunnel capital of the United States.
What up?
We
And
have
the world.
we have had so many high tunnels, these big
Hmm.
Yes.
structures. These are unheated,
Hmm.
passively heated greenhouses that just trap sunlight and keep the wind and rain and everything else out. We've seen those go up like crazy. And I remember back when I used to work at the horticulture research farm, this would have been a little over 10 years ago. That was kind of the beginning of this period of these things going up. And so when I was working out there and harvesting vegetables and weighing them for all the research projects and stuff, I'd have people come out and ask me about these high tunnel structures and say, "Oh, we just got this NRCS money. We're looking to do this." And I would give them a little spiel about how we would grow vegetables in the high tunnels and some of the things they needed to think about, et cetera. But season extension in general it's not a new thing. It's something that's been
Mm.
around in one way or another for a really
Hmm.
long time.
It may be
Um,
something as simple as a variety. We talked about those before. It may be a variety that matures earlier. That's also, or matures later.
yeah,
That's also a form of a season extension. So it's not necessarily kind of the bricks and mortar behind the thing. So yeah, most people have been involved in it one way or another.
I think it's come to the point where some people associate season extension with high tunnels, and we will
Yes,
we
I
will
think so.
probably do a high tunnel episode or a
Yes.
series of episodes maybe later, just because the need and the interest is there. But for this one, I thought, and you all let me know if you want to go along with this. I thought maybe we could just talk about the season extension concept and maybe the lower tech, simpler reasons or
Mhm.
approaches to how we might be able to do it. But starting with why on earth, as we talked about the transition of fall to winter, it's a time to chill. Why on earth
Yeah.
would you
Literally
do
time to
this
chill.
to yourself? And a lot of
And
people
and
I
may
feel
not.
homeowners are
personally
probably gonna have a different
targeted
reason.
every time.
I would
Yeah.
say, as somebody who likes to joke and kind of dump on season extension as being like painful or extending the time of great effort, really, I think one of the things that makes it make a lot of sense, especially where we are, and especially in the fall, is that a lot of times we just kind of get a day or two of weather that would terminate the season otherwise. But if you can just slide through that, you get another couple to several weeks of good kind of good weather. Basically, it's a way to end the season in a nice, like, kind of
Smooth
this,
transition.
yeah, smooth transition rather than just like abruptly against, your
Your will.
plans. Yeah.
And roughly that time around here might be mid to late October that
Mhm.
normal
Mhm.
defining frost
Killing
and
frost or
Yes.
et
Yeah.
cetera would happen. And so in reality, with season extension, even with just basic season extension, we can be looking into, harvesting into November, sometimes even into December, depending on what you're doing.
Right.
when I talked to my commercial producers, and it kind of dawned on me, I guess I was working several years ago in a food-based program for school systems at farm to school program, and seasonality of availability was a real big issue for schools because they're like, listen, it's not worth us changing our protocols and our methods of preparation of
Mhm.
locally grown food stuff and then having to switch back and forth, between commercially purchased,
Produced.
produced. Yeah, this caffeine and tea I've doubled up on. It is real. But yeah,
Ride the
for food,
snake.
yeah, it is. I'm riding a fine line here between fun and fundamentally broken. So
Season extension.
I sound like chef, yeah, and it's only going to get
Nice.
worse because I am on the parabolic curve right now, and I'm still going up. So you guys be prepared. But yeah, school
Mhm.
systems had a big issue with the seasonality of produce, and I got it. It kind of hit home to me. And so that's one of the things I think Kentucky is still trying to get a handle on is having produce available for longer periods of time throughout the year. And that's a big deal because that's customer retention, that's getting new customers, that's getting commercial customers that need year-round availability. So to me, that's the purest form of season extension is to increase the longevity of the availability. So
Yeah.
And with that, your workers. So if you're trying to keep your
mm,
workers,
good point.
keep good
Yeah.
workers,
Yeah.
Mhm.
if they can, work the entire year in some way, you can keep on that good farm manager. And yeah, you can't keep on everybody for most operations, but if you one good person makes a huge difference. And so if you can keep them on and keep paying them and have things for them to do under that season extension, my reason may surprise you all. So I like season extension as someone with a high tunnel because I mean, I'm doing a lot in the wintertime, but I'm not harvesting in the wintertime and I'm not really selling in the wintertime. I'm preparing, I'm still getting rest, but I like to see things grow. Like that is fundamentally a part of me, I think, at this point, and having something to nurture and watch it and see how it's doing and something to take care of. I have no kids, can you tell?
I think this
So
is
I
really
need
beautiful. I
something to
think what
take
you're
care
sharing
of.
is really beautiful, and I appreciate you sharing it.
So for me, I have found that winter growing and a high tunnel makes it easier for me. And we're going to talk about low tunnels on here. I've done low tunnels for several years, which are great and were a great transition for me. And I still do low tunnels even with my high one, but it's a lot easier to walk around in your high tunnel. But it brings me joy, and I can sit out there with my baby plants and get my hands a little dirty and get some good microbes going. And it just there's a lot of, I think, mentally, when everything is gray and seasonal depression can become real, that has been a great outlet for me. And then I get the perk of having some earlier blooms and seeing pretty things even when it's March and it's gross.
Yeah, and I think that the season extension thing, it's important that we frame the conversation right so that it's not, imagine, a ripe red tomato on
Hmm.
Christmas Day,
Yeah.
right? I
There
mean,
are limitations.
you can do, if you want, energy costs and other things, if you want to deal with that, you can in some way, and a supplemental lighting and all that kind of stuff. Season extension fundamentally is literally what the name says, where you're just extending and you're kind of pushing the limits on both the front end and back end of the season. And you push them enough and they eventually converge and meet. But in general, and I think one thing that for me, that on a more of a home garden scale, there's something really magical about being able to go out and pull some kale off of a plant and make a fresh kale salad, or saute some of that in like late November.
And the
That's,
Hmm.
quality, how
Mhm.
about that, Brett?
yeah, the
The
quality,
quality
it's
of that,
especially
yeah.
after a frost, you get that.
Mhm.
And so, and that's another thing too, I just wanted to mention is that when we're talking about season extension, a lot of times it's taking things that are already adept at doing well when it's cold out
Mm-hmm.
and just giving them a little bit of a help rather than
Mm-hmm.
trying
Yeah.
to take the pepper plant that's going to,
Mhm.
lose its
Below
mind at the
50
first time it
and
gets, yeah, exactly. It's the first time it hits
Some
40.
of these things, the photo period, yeah, temperature is one thing, but photo period's another, and if you're fighting both of those things, then economically, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if you're a homeowner and it's just a hobby, then so be it. Have at it.
Yeah.
But economically, I mean, there's a breaking point to where, providing that supplemental light that you mentioned, Brett, especially with energy costs now, just doesn't make sense. So I love the fact that you mentioned like working with things that are already good during that time period. You're just providing a little extra oomph
Yeah.
and being
Mm-hmm.
realistic about what you can and cannot do. And I mean, that's one of the things about high tunnels that is interesting. The way that people are actually using those is that so many times I'll see a crop out there, and I guess the range is I say, well, it'll add 7 to 21 days on the back end and front end of a growing period, given the weather conditions in your area. But so many times, producers start backing that date up that they're producing more and more and more, and then a cold snap comes, and I see supplemental heat in so many
Mm-hmm.
of those high tunnels where the true spirit of the high tunnel is it's passively heated, just by the
Mm-hmm.
structure itself. So it's interesting the way people are adapting and using those, but sometimes, they roll the dice a little bit hard and they don't want to lose a crop. So, things like supplemental heat creep in there. So it's interesting the way people adapt to the situation of season extension. But I love the fact that sometimes you can get it on, early in the season. Sometimes you can add a little time late in the season. So yeah, it's great.
So I think when you strip it down to its most basic, the most basic functions of the techniques that we apply, it's about in some way getting a cover over of some sort over top of a crop. It's about trying to trap solar energy or thermal energy coming from the soil in
Mm-hmm.
and around the plant mass. It's about keeping frost and wind and freezing rain and other things off of the crop.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
There's a lot of different ways we can do that, right? I mean, you could go out and
Yeah.
hold an umbrella over it, and have
Mhm.
your one kale plant or your one broccoli plant make it all the way through the winter if your
The
resolve is
original
strong enough.
commercial
Right.
situation that we were in, the original like big wave that really changed horticulture and agriculture in the U.S., primarily horticulture crops, is just plasticulture, using plastic and raised beds. That's the purest form of season extension, and I think we overlook that a lot
And
of
you're talking
times.
about plastic on the soil surface. The
On
the
the soil
plant is the
surface on a
plant is
raised
still
bed.
is
Yeah, the
cemented to
plant is
the.
still in the ground.
Right.
But I know a lot of listeners may have never seen like commercial plasticulture operations. But if you look at these big long rows, typically the most predominant color is black, just lots of black rows of plastic. I mean, that's the original season extension technique because, yeah, we're trying to protect against wind and cold weather, adverse weather conditions. But it's also this concept of growing a crop in optimal conditions to get a viable crop as quickly as possible. That's the original season extension wave that hit the country was plasticulture. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's a good lead in, Brett, that you mentioned. So there's different ways to look at it. Now it seems like we think about protected agriculture or protected horticulture
Right.
with the row covers and stuff, which that's pretty exciting. The technology has gotten really good there, and I know you guys are going to talk about that. But a lot of different ways to look at season extension.
You'll have some other ways that come to mind. Because I think of cold frames as another
Oh yeah,
example, or
absolutely.
even just
Mm-hmm.
just planting things on a certain side of your house or a certain side of your root
Yeah,
cellar as this like
those have been going on how long, Brett?
very long time. At
Very
least
long
at least since
time. Yeah.
hobbits were real.
Oh, yes. They're still real, Brett. Come on now.
That's since they started being
Let's not
real.
get. Yeah, they're real now. But yeah, cold frames. I mean, using manure as a passive heat source to change the
Yeah.
degree 5 degrees. I mean, that's one of the original ways that people extended the season.
And a
Way
cold
back
cold
when. So it's not a
frame,
new concept.
kind of like a big, deep picture frame laid on the
Yes.
soil surface.
Mm-hmm.
It,
Mm-hmm.
it hinges open. The lid can hinge open. You can bring it open to vent
Yeah.
it. You can actually get
It's like a little mini greenhouse.
yeah.
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 Mhm. Yeah.
And if you even go farther back, you know that manure source used to be like in northern climates a very important component of that. I don't see that used practically much anymore, but they would put some compostable material in there because when things compost, it gives off heat. Well, that would heat the cold frame in very cold conditions, depending on how you had the thing insulated. So these northern climates, they would grow things way out of the normal season just with a compostable material layered underneath the soil and the crop to be grown. Because they would take advantage of that compost heat, and it was pretty amazing. There's some great examples in
Yeah.
different areas of people, and that used to be a more common practice, I think.
Yeah. There I can't remember his name, but there was a guy we learned about when I was in school who had, I mean, this is up in either like Detroit or Milwaukee or something like that. A former basketball player had
Will
set up
Allen.
Will Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh
he
well,
had
did
done
not know that.
he had done like he did extensive composting because he had worked out to get a lot of plant waste from grocery stores and was doing
Mm-hmm.
a lot of composting, was using that kind of thermal heat buildup to push the season as well. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's
Was he
still
using
going on.
anything to trap the heat over
Oh
top or
yeah, yeah,
anything?
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
so
pretty
still
sure it
was
was
doing
like
that.
the
Gotcha.
if I remember right, it was poly
Well,
tunnels, but he had the
yeah,
the compost active in there.
Like that's growing
Yeah.
power. Is that right?
Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
right. Yeah. I couldn't
cool.
remember the name of him or his organization, just what he was doing.
And
Yeah, I
in
remember
the
that.
home gardens, I used to see a lot of glass bell jars over things. I don't see that as much anymore. But when glass technology, way back when, it got cheap and very effective.
Mm.
Still at flea markets, I look for these bell jars that
They're
was
called
designed to
they're called what are those called?
cloacas, or I don't know how to pronounce it.
No.
That's not right, but
It's a
it's a strange word.
yeah.
I think.
Cloacas,
I think
bird anatomy.
No, they're
Cloaca,
cloicious?
yeah. Somebody needs to fact check
cloaca
that and
is
give
like
me the
the
Yeah,
slit like
yes,
on a reptile where the like
yes.
genitals
yeah.
and cloaca.
Same with birds too. Yeah,
We veered off, but
Yeah.
I do not know how to pronounce that word, so I
cloish.
call
Maybe
them bit
I'm guessing
cloish.
cloish.
I
I
think
Yeah.
so.
use but every once in a while we get a late frost or for
Mhm,
people who will put their tomatoes in a little bit too early because we'll get those,
mhm.
75-degree days in April, 80-degree days in April, and people want to put their tomatoes in. Getting hot in here,
So put your tomatoes in
but
the ground.
don't do it until May.
Oh yeah,
But
don't.
So
at
take
least
off
in
all your
Kentucky.
row covers.
So we have
Cloche.
those times when late
Close.
stuff can happen, and I do tell people, I'm like, you got any milk jugs? You got any
Yeah.
kitty litter jugs? And the purpose, they don't even necessarily have to be clear, is to
Mhm.
trap that thermal mass.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I'll give you an example of some. We had, I think it was 5 years ago, we had a frost after Derby Day, which we always say in Central Kentucky area, you usually can plant after Derby Day. Well, this was after Derby Day, and we were getting a frost. I was actually on time for the first time in forever, getting my
First Saturday in May for the
Should be
yeah.
your first clue
Ugh,
something bad is going to
exactly. It
happen.
really should have. I was on schedule. So I got my warm season crops were already in the ground. And it was going to be 35 degrees and it would have taken out my stuff. And so what I ended up doing is I had a bunch of fabric row cover. And if you're not familiar with like a fabric row cover, it's also called Remay or
Spun bond or
Agribond.
yeah,
Agrabond, SpongeBob,
Yeah.
and it's kind of
trade
like
name, yeah.
a cheesecloth. If you're not familiar with that, just kind of imagine a cheesecloth. Air can move in and out, but it traps, and usually, depending on the weight of it, can get you about 3 degrees, 3 to 5 degrees.
And it comes in different weights, doesn't it,
It does,
Alexis? The spun
yeah.
bond,
Yeah, it can
the
be
bond
some people
material.
use it
Yeah.
just for excluding pests, and so really
Mhm.
they're using the lightest possible, which might only be 1 degree, but I think it'll get you up to 5, which
Mhm.
always sounds crazy. Like when I tell somebody like put that on, it'll get you 3 to 5 degrees, but when like that
It's a
it
big
really is
deal.
that simple. Like three
Yeah.
degrees lower could kill the plant.
And it works for some crops better than others. Like it's just saved our strawberry plantings in Central Kentucky, where I'm an agent. It's saved because we had some freezes, warm ups, and then freezes
Yeah.
again. And that floating row cover does just that. It doesn't need external support, but it saved our strawberry crop because of that 3 to 5
Mhm.
degrees. I mean, two degrees would have saved the crop.
Mhm.
And so that was a very big deal for this producer. And there were so many temperature variations this past spring. They just got sick of it and said, finally, we're not going to, because it takes labor to remove that, and
Mhm.
it was a fairly large scale production planning. But they did that twice. They pulled it over, pulled it back, pulled it over, pulled it back, and it saved their crop. And it was amazing because there was some that was not covered,
Mhm.
and they lost that crop.
Mhm.
but it was a strategic move. But yeah, it made a huge difference, and that's just I guess the overall term is what, floating row covers, you
Mhm.
said? Yeah.
I think one of the things about season extension that sometimes gets we focus on, and I think it is an important part of it. We focus on that ambient temperature increase. In other words, the average temperature under there is 3 degrees warmer. But another
Mhm.
part of it is if there is wind when it is
Mhm.
cold,
Mhm.
Mhm.
that time of year is a very dry time of year, and the wind chill effect, if you can get the plant out of the wind or shield it from the
Mhm.
wind, there's not a biting cold dry wind blowing across the bottom of those leaves, pulling some moisture out of the leaves.
Mhm.
That is as important. So basically, if it's cold, you get an advantage from any sort of covering. If it is cold
Yeah.
and windy, the advantage of that covering
Yeah,
is
magnifies.
multiplied times a whole lot. And around here, especially with these crazy weather events, it's usually there is this really crazy wind blowing polar vortex kind
Unfortunately.
of vibe
Yeah.
happening.
With all of these the technology we're talking about, floating row covers, low tunnels, high tunnels, what makes this challenging for season extension is just the sheer variability, the highs and the lows, and the how big of a difference it is between the two. Just
Mhm.
really adds challenge to all these scenarios that we're talking about today. I don't know, Alexis, have you ever had any panic scenarios where you have a high tunnel and then all of a sudden, I mean, you've got your sweater on and your boots, and it's late September and you're going to run out, and then it all of a sudden hits 85, 90 degrees on a
Right.
September day in Kentucky. I mean, you ever having panics over that because
I
you just know what the temperature is going to do inside?
I have automatic sides
Oh,
on
you do?
mine that go by
Fantastic. Yeah.
temperature because of that
Mm-hmm.
reason. But when I was working at UK, on the weekends I would open and close the tunnels on the South Farm, and so I I might be watering and it's cold, and this is the middle of the winter, and they had winter crops in there, and it's cold. I'm watering at the greenhouse. The sun comes out, and I have to like stop everything I'm doing and run to the farm. And by the time I would get there, the tunnel could be 85 degrees, which is way too hot
Mhm.
for kales and carrots and
This is
stuff
when
like
it's
that.
ambient, like 30 degrees
Just light,
outside.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
30 degrees outside, and I'd have to crack those open and get them vented. And if the clouds come over, then it starts getting cold again. And so
A
Mhm.
lot of
that's why,
management.
yeah, it's a lot of management. That's why I got automatic sides. But where I've done low tunnels, so for those of you who are like, what are low tunnels? So low tunnels or caterpillar tunnels, I hear those used interchangeably, but they are technically different. And uh, I don't know. Does anybody know that? I always get them backwards, which one is which. One of them you can stand in, but it is like a not a permanent structure. Like a high tunnel is a permanent large structure. These are something that would cover maybe one or two rows, and you can
Mhm.
stand in them, and it is only up typically for a season. And then the other one is something short. So it might be only waist high,
3 to 4 feet for
three
low
to four
tunnels.
feet
Yeah,
high.
typically.
It's usually only covering one row, or like a 3 foot wide bed or a 4 foot wide bed kind of max. And then but they are similar in the way that they are hoops and there is plastic stretched over them. So I use the ones that are short, and I have for several years that are about waist high. They cover a 4 foot bed, and those ones are
Are those
harder.
bond material or
Plastic.
poly material?
Poly, it's
Plastic
poly.
or
Yeah, it's
poly? Yeah.
plastic. It's plastic.
Okay.
And then when it gets really cold, I have fabric that goes on the plants from underneath those. So those honestly, like Brett said, it's really mostly for wind, because I can get away with just fabric because I'm growing crops that are appreciate cold. A lot of them need that cold. They need that what's called vernalization
Mhm.
to actually germinate at all. And so I'm just trying to get them a little bit earlier, but I'm trying to protect them from that wind. And so I do that with poly. So those I actually go out, and because these crops are less sensitive and they're usually pretty low to the ground, they're getting a lot of thermal heat just from that top inch of soil. I will vent them every day, kind of, unless it's below, like unless it's 10 degrees or below, I will vent them at pretty much every
And
day.
when you say vent them,
I will it's it's really jacked up the way my system is. I just have some cinder blocks on each side, and I
Nice.
will like pull up the side like a curtain and prop it up on a cinder block just so nothing gets fried. But I have missed it and or they have fallen down because it's been super windy and they fell off the cinder blocks. I didn't secure it very well, and I come back and my snapdragons are fried,
Yep.
because it got so
Have
hot
you used
underneath
the
there.
slitted? I know there's two different styles,
Mhm.
slitted and punched. Have you used
I
those?
have not. Usually I try to reuse my poly more than 1 year just from a
Gotcha. Yeah.
sustainability standpoint. If I can reuse it, I will. So in my brain, the slitted or the punch would not hold up
Mhm.
as well because it's
Josh, do
already.
you have any familiar? Are you familiar with those at all down south? As far as do you have any experience? I don't have much experience, but I've seen producers that swear by one or the other depending on which crop.
Yeah, my experience down in Georgia was just primarily high tunnels. I mean, we just had
Okay,
high tunnels. That's
gotcha.
what we rocked, and we pull at the side sometimes, but it, freezing temperatures were rare. Like it
Mhm.
was kind of more, yeah, easier to go for 4 seasons.
So that pulling up the sides is pretty important because I imagine it can get really hot really quick if they're not
Mhm.
Sure.
ventilated at all.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
smaller the area, the faster it heats up and the faster it
Mhm.
cools off.
Oh
Mhm.
my
Right.
gosh,
Right.
That's
yeah,
one
you
of the
gotta
reasons
be
why
on
people
top of
like high
that.
tunnels. I mean, it's
Mhm.
that the
More room
larger
for
thermal
error.
Bit of
mass
buffer.
gives you a
Bigger
little bit more
volume,
time.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, those low ti I really fried my snapdragons. I came back and they were just like, "Meh." So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it didn't take long either, did it? Because you were
no.
probably trying to get back to them and
Yeah.
still missed it, yeah.
So, but low tunnels are I'm going to go with low tunnels as far as those 4-foot ones I'm talking about. So, for the purpose of this, and if anybody's out there, you're screaming at me saying low tunnels are actually the big tall ones, whatever. The purpose
I
right now,
actually heard someone propose that we refer to the small ones as low tunnels, the middle ones as mesotunnels, and the big ones as high tunnels. And I was like, that would be helpful and clarify things. But
yeah,
I think you're right the way that you're referring to it, though.
I think the
High
caterpillar
tunnels and
tunnels
everything else.
are the ones that are like you can walk in
Mm.
because they look like caterpillars, like they're the way that that's stretched out over the hoops. But anyways, so the low tunnels, I suggest those to people who are kind of in the middle. And so, you may be too small scale for, something that you can walk in, or, funds just aren't available, which was, the number of reasons. Maybe you live in a subdivision or an area where something like that isn't allowed. That would be a permanent structure. So you need something, but you're wanting to do a little bit larger scale than just a cold frame. Low tunnels are great. So you can get pretty much everything you need at your local Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware, and you can make it happen. It's not.
The hoops come like I've seen hoops for low tunnels made out of everything.
Mhm,
Sometimes they're, purchased for that strictly that they've been
mhm.
designed for that purpose, poly or metal, but, people
PVC
make
pipe is
them? I mean,
great.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, electrical conduit, if you think this is something that you're gonna use over and over, which is what I've used, and it's definitely more expensive and it has gotten way more expensive. But electrical conduit just bent into a hoop. You can buy a hoop bender, or I know
Hmm.
people who have just found the right item to bend those hoops around
Yeah, you
and
can kind of make like a jig. We did
mhm,
that at a very cash-strapped school I worked at,
yeah.
and
Use like a
just kind
heat
of.
gun or something to heat them up or
Well, it
what?
was in New
Mhm.
Mexico, so it was already hot. We weren't building
Gotcha,
it in the
gotcha.
wintertime, but yeah.
Nice.
Or I've seen them made and a smaller scale that maybe is out of the wind more. So if you're doing backyard or just you have an area that's protected from the wind, first of all, jealous. But second of all, you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
use just something cheap like PVC pipe that you could just
Mhm.
kind of bend over
Hmm.
and go over those 3-foot wide or 4-foot wide beds that you might have.
I've seen people use, the poly material. They would have plastic on at one point in the year, and then later on in the year, they would have
Insect
just
netting
the
or something.
lightweight fabric on
Mhm,
for insects, not
mhm,
necessarily for temperature modification at all, but for insects, and they never moved their hoops, and I thought that was interesting. They managed it kind of dual purpose, and they
mhm.
use the same hoops. It was pretty cool.
Mhm. I've seen people now as well. So, in the world I'm in, we use a lot of trellising for upright stems, and so the kind of typical thing to use is what's called Hort Nova netting. It's a brand name. There's probably other brands, but that's the only one I've ever seen, and it's white plastic and it forms these like 6 inch by 6 inch squares. And it's netting that you would put horizontally across the bed for the stems to grow upright through. Hopefully that's visually understanding. And so some people have converted over into using concrete like wire mesh, and so it's the same 6 inch by 6 inch, but it's made out of metal, and they're bending that so it stands up on its own.
Mm.
And they're actually using that, and they're draping fabric over top of those, using it almost like hoops. And but usually the thought process is by the time the stems are tall enough to grow through that, you don't need the fabric anymore. So I've
Mm.
seen that where, just one less step to cut out. And I think that that could be doable as
They're
well.
just like streamlining the process and
Hmm.
modifying it, keeping the concepts in mind, but then modifying it
Right.
locally to
Right.
what fits their production. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
I would say even
Yeah.
even maybe one step back down even more in the
Mhm.
technology with sort of hoop like structures is that we talked about the row cover as a
Mhm.
means of increasing the cold tolerance or protection or whatever. Some of those crops, especially if you're going to eat the leaf of the crop, you
Mhm.
kind of want to keep the fabric off of the leaf, because if it touches the
Yes.
leaf, the moisture can accumulate and cause a frost or burn or whatever. And so you can also use hoops that are just like a heavy gauge wire hoop, just to give you a little bit of a structure. You put these the same way, like a caterpillar style, down the bed, and it just the frost blanket can lay on top of it
Mhm.
without touching
Mm.
the plant. It also makes it easier to remove the frost blanket periodically.
Yeah. I would definitely recommend whatever you do, whether it's plastic or glass or fabric or whatever, keep it off of the plant. Even if you're not eating the plant leaf itself, especially if it's a young plant, a lot of us are
Hmm.
going with small plugs or seedlings or something like that. If it's touching the plant, it'll freeze to it. And so
Yeah.
definitely have some way to get that fabric or whatever from touching it. Glass and plastic will actually
Yeah, they'll
tra-
transmit heat. It's
trans
the air is what's
yeah.
like protecting you.
Right, your air is your little bubble that's formed
Mm.
around those plants. So yeah, but season extension can be as intense and weird or as simple as you want to
As
make it. Like
wild as you want to make it.
it's all simple, right? The concepts are all simple, but it doesn't have to be just a big high tunnel or, breaking out the sledgehammer or, something like that. But if you do want to do it, all of that is acceptable. It's acceptable and accessible. And there's some great videos online about how to build
Mhm.
them, and what you need, step by step what you need.
Hmm.
If you've had one ever go over it, listen, all right, I'm really proud of this. I think I've told the story before, I'm gonna tell it again. So this early spring we had really bad winds come through in central Kentucky. So we had a tornado in the county that I live in. Fortunately, it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, didn't really do any damage, no one was hurt. But we had and I have a little weather station. So we had 73 was the high mile per hour
Mm.
winds, where my high tunnel and low tunnels are located, are right out in the middle where they can get hit with some good winds. And I had some low tunnels, and the one that was, essentially protecting the other ones, they all stayed up. My metal conduit was twisted, like completely twisted, but they were all still like standing up, and I could have left them the rest of the winter, but they looked so bad, and I thought, well, if we get some random weird snow, they'll go down from the weight. But they did stand up to that, and I'm very proud of our building techniques with that, because they took on 73-mile per hour winds. So if
Yeah.
Field
y'all need some
tested.
help, I can
You
get you
should you
there.
should post a picture of that in the
I should.
Instagram
Yeah,
teaser for
I
this.
should.
Mm.
I do. I
How
have one.
far? What's the spacing on your ribs for that thing?
My spacing, it's roughly 5 feet. So
Mm, okay. Oh
in some
wow.
cases they might be more
Close,
like
yeah.
6 feet.
What size
If it's like
conduit?
I'm using quarter inch. Does that sound right?
Mm.
I think it's like number 10,
Okay,
whatever number 10 is. Metal
half
conduit.
inch maybe.
Maybe it's half inch. Yeah.
Yeah,
I know it's a lot smaller than you would think it is. So
that's
yeah,
cool.
it worked great, and there's some ratchet straps
That's
involved, and
galvanized conduit,
Ratchets.
galvanized
yeah,
metal conduit.
Yeah, metal conduit is what we're using. But like I said, if you're in a protected area, like you're doing this beside your house and your house gets, you don't get any of those strong north winds, or ours comes from like the
Mhm.
northwest at our house. But if you're not getting any of those, then by all means, like I tried getting away with PVC, it just wasn't gonna work. But the
Yeah.
structure itself will function if you can protect it from the wind. But just those floating row covers will make a huge difference. We all know now I like have flowers. So coming from that world, what's called the cool flowers game, most of those can be grown with just that Agrabah remake covering. Like you don't need anything special. I even made my own little wire hoops with some stuff I bought at, Lowe's and Home Depot, just like a roll of gauge wire. And I cut it one day and sat in front of the TV and bent it. And it was the ugliest thing you will ever see, but it works fine. And it was like, I don't know, $15 for the roll. Like, and I made all, 30 of them or something. So it's totally doable. Plan ahead, because you do not want to be the person who needs fabric 2 days before the frost is coming. Ask me how I know.
Mhm.
So make sure you have your equipment before the frost comes. So be ordering it now.
Also, if it's at all possible to put stretch plastic or move plastic where you need to go before it gets really, really cold
And
Mm.
windy.
and windy,
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't help it, but what something that we opened this episode by me being a hater on the season of fall. And so one thing I would say just on the season extension thing, to be a little bit of a hater, and I've earned my stripes in doing this
Yes, he
enough to
has.
say, is that when you do go low tech, which is great, it's accessible, it's affordable, it's all those things. In some cases, in many cases, for that variability, like Ray pointed out, you have to kind of be the tech. You
Mhm.
have to be the
Mhm.
thermostat, because if you don't have a thermostatically controlled ridge vent on a high tunnel or curtains, as Alexis said, if you leave it out there and it's hot, it's going to get fried. Or if you uncover it and it was warm all day, but now it's going to get cold tonight and you don't cover it back up. In other words, season extension, we think about, oh
You're
yeah,
tied to the farm.
yes, you've got to
Yeah.
More so.
yes, you have to
More
harvest,
so.
you have to do those things if you're going to, but it is like, it's not like it in other ways, but in some ways, as far as schedule goes, it's like a dairy, twice a day.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
it's like that's how I've always thought of it, is it's like an animal enterprise. You got to
The
be like on
intensity
it.
is up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Things will die. Like if you go away for some day in the summer, at like most crops, like you water them before you leave. Yeah, they don't get harvested. Yeah, maybe you lose a little money, but like you're gonna come back and those plants are gonna start growing again, and providing the next week. If I leave my tunnel open one night, or my curtains stop working, which is like I always have
Right.
this fear, you will have sleepless nights. I will tell you
Mm.
that. But you forget to close that cold frame up, you forget to take those jugs off in the morning, your plants will die, period. So maybe if it's one or two, it's not a big deal. But if you're going larger scale, it is, you're losing a lot. So you will be tied to your farm in winter. And maybe that's a good excuse. Listen, sometimes it's nice to be like, hey, I gotta go. I gotta go close my tunnel. And nobody's gonna argue with you on that. And it's a great way to leave a party.
Yeah, and there's a
Isn't there like
rhythmic nature to it that some people
Yeah.
find really helpful and really good,
Mhm.
but it is something that people don't, they think it is very different from growing seasonally
Hmm.
outside in a number of ways, and one of them is you don't close the curtains on on summer. Like you don't have to go and do
Sure we do.
that.
How else are we gonna get the fall, Brett?
That's
you
true.
got to
Close
stretch the
out
shade
summer as
cloth?
And with
quickly as
curtains on
possible.
summer. So yeah, I just think that is a reality of and we dealt with this because the university, when I was working at the university gets a work break around Christmas time.
Hmm.
That you're off for a number of
Mhm.
days. Well, guess what? The tunnels are still
Not.
there,
Yeah.
still have to be
Right.
open and closed, and you have to figure out how that's going to work. And I'm
Mhm.
not belly aching about that, but it just is the element of season extension I think
Mhm.
that people overlook the most in
Hmm.
terms of the bad side, the downside
Yeah.
of it is,
Yeah.
yes, there is work, but it is slower paced because everything's growing more slowly, including the
Yeah.
weeds.
Hmm.
But that aspect of, and it's because you don't have to work out there all day, but you got to be there at 10 a.m. and you got to be
Hmm.
there at 5 p.m.
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
that is something that if you can't account for that, you might look in a different direction. But so as far as home gardeners, if they're wanting to try some season extension and maybe have some of their cole crops or their root crops or things hang around longer, maybe look at some frost blankets and some simple little wire hoops to cover
Yeah,
those.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
If you're in the home garden or large garden to small commercial space, maybe those high tunnels and or caterpillar tunnels could be
Low
something that
tunnels.
you would look at.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to go full whole hog with the high tunnel, by all means, and add some automation, some thermostatic controls, and all that kind of
Highly
stuff.
recommend. Worth every freaking
Yes.
penny I
Could be
spent.
a huge
I did it
find.
That's where
twice.
the
Like
technology is
I
so
loved it
good.
so much I did it again and I upgraded that one. And they even have ones that have like wind control on them because that's the other thing with high tunnels is if you get a windstorm that randomly comes through with those, those
Yeah, you got
spring
to close that thing
thunderstorms,
up.
you got to close it up even if it's hot. And they have ones that even have like wind sensors on them now and they'll close by themselves if a certain gust comes through. But yeah, highly recommend that. If one thing, I know I've said it before, but I want to remind everybody, if you are doing any type of fabric to whether you're doing it all winter time or you're doing it just to protect your strawberries on those couple cold nights, whatever you're covering that plant with, whether it's a jug or some fabric, has to touch the ground on all sides because what you're trying to get there is your thermal mass coming out of the soil. The heat that's going to rise out of the soil is going to create that bubble around your plant. So if you're just throwing a sheet over, I love to see the sheets that are just like thrown over bushes
Got to cover your mass.
and that that sheet has to come all the way down and touch the ground so that you're going to trap that thermal mass. So there's your little tip for the day.
Earlier when you said you put stuff out early and then it was going to get cold
Oh
and you
yeah.
were in the panic, I imagined I imagined you making Tyler just like chug gallons of milk so that you could have like dozens
Drink
of
it. Yeah.
like, oh, I
It
don't feel
was
so good.
it was pretty
Waste
good
not, want
actually.
not.
Literally for like 3 days, I said, I think I'm gonna throw up. Like at least once an hour. I think I'm gonna throw
Nice.
up. I think I'm gonna throw up. What we ended up doing, and I have a picture somewhere. I need to post it too. But so I like went around and I had these little hoops. I wasn't doing low tunnels at the time, so I had these little hoops. I had a bunch of cinder blocks available to me. I was also renting my plot at this time, so that added another layer of fun. And so we went around, we got all the fabric where it was up off, and I was able to cover this small plot that I had. And we took lights, and it's like those old shop lights with the light bulbs that get hot, like you can't touch
Yeah.
them. And I put them in the cinder blocks. And so that they wouldn't catch the fabric on fire. So I
Nice.
had the extension cords running all over and I put these lights in. And so it looked like when you drove by at night, it looked like these little alien spaceships had landed. And it was hysterical looking, but it worked. But I will say, I planted my second succession, and I ended up planted it early, and so they were a week or two planted later than the early ones, and they bloomed faster than the early ones because the early ones were so stressed from the
Mm.
cold. So I was like, man, I could have just planted
Yeah.
later and had them at the same time. So there's your other tip.
Yeah, a
Sometimes
testament
it's
to
just
if you can
yeah,
only push certain things so
Yeah.
far.
so far.
So
Light especially, yeah.
that's the toughest thing is being realistic and matching the crop that first of all needs to be growing during that season or has the best shot with the light conditions, temperature conditions, wind conditions. But just folks being realistic about what they can and cannot do with what's available to them. Even with all of these techniques we're talking about, if you're growing something completely outside of the parameters and it's economically just not possible to give it enough sunlight or artificial light, don't try it. Don't do it.
Yeah, not worth it.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Anything else we can think of? We've got some good. If you're interested, we'll post in the show notes some. There's a calendar that we have for Western, Central, Eastern Kentucky. If you're not in Kentucky, you can adjust based on your zone any of these, but there's some dates on here as far as kind of the earliest and latest that you can plant with some season extension and what that is that will do well. And so we can post that in the show notes. and just some tips for using slitted row cover, or using agribon, anything along those lines. And I feel like we don't say it every time, we assume it, but as a reminder, we all do work for Extension, which means we serve the people of Kentucky. And it's not unusual for any of us to get, Brett said he works with SARE, which is a national organization, CCD, they work with Tennessee and people. So if you're not here and you want to shoot us an email, the email, by the way, is hortculturepodcast@l.uky.edu. We'll again post that on our social media page, which is Horticulture Podcast on Instagram. But anyways, you can all feel free to shoot us an email, or give us a call if you've got some questions.
Slide into our DMs.
Slide into our DMs on Instagram.
Do it.
If you need some help, actually, I've got a grower I'm waiting on a call on to help her. She's got a new high tunnel, and so talking through some of that stuff with us. That's what we're here for, and we're happy to help you if you need more than what these resources we post in the show notes have. So, anything else, guys? Leave us a review.
Happy fall.
Happy fall. If you're into
the
that
best season of the
Enjoy
year.
Sorry that Josh really made
Enjoy
us
it.
focus on the negativity of it earlier.
Or if you're a summer gal, I have lots of friends who are summer gals, summer guys. As I have
Get
said
over it.
before, and Brett keeps saying, you think of this as time to rest with the trees. Okay, so
I'm more
even
of a
the
summer
trees
gal.
love
Day
summer.
by day, I'm more of a summer gal than I used to be, but I'm also a fall fella.
A fall fella and a summer gal. Love it. All right, everybody. Thank you again for joining us, and catch up with us next week. But we hope that as we grow this podcast, you will grow with us. Thank you for being here. Leave us a review, a good one. I want 5 stars.
Please and thank you.
Okay, that's all.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Yeah. See you guys.